So today, in this video, I'm out for the first time in a year, and I'll go into the reasons behind that later on in the video. But I'm really looking forward to getting out, really excited about it. I'm not going to go too far. It's probably only going to be a 20-minute walk in, but it is technically still wild camping. And the main purpose of tonight is to test out the Zpacks or Zpacks Altaplex DCF or Dynamic Composite Fabric tent, which is incredibly lightweight and actually very, very roomy for one person. The conditions tonight, it's to get down to about 2 degrees, decent amount of wind, maybe 20-mile-an-hour gusts. But on top of that, tomorrow morning, it's like going to be lashing rain. So I'll hang, that's the start about 8 o'clock. So hopefully I'll hang about in the tent and see how it copes with sort of wind and lashing rain. At the moment, I'm kind of Gore-Texed up. I'd rather sort of walk in tonight. It wouldn't be my first choice to be wearing my Gore-Texes, but just so that I'm not carrying the Gore-Texes as extra weight. They're part of my clothing at the moment. And I'll probably do a bit of a talk, hopefully do a bit of a talk, on the kit that I selected for tonight and why I've selected that. Okay, so join me in the rest of the trip. So one thing for me that I will say immediately about this tent is I'm used to my small one-man tent at Hillyberg Act 2, and actually my other one-man tent is a Hillyberg Solo. And the thing I'm going to say right away is the room and volume in this tent for getting organised is amazing. I mean, it's really, really good. Now the audio might mess about a little bit here because I'm playing around with the microphone. So bear with me on that. The idea now is really just to get quickly change, not really change, but just get warmer clothes on. When you come to set your tent up, if the conditions are not too demanding, then I would just go ahead and get your tent set up, and that's the first thing you do. But if the conditions are very demanding, I would usually actually sort my clothing out first. So for example, if you're walking up to a summit and you're working really hard, you're generating a lot of heat, you probably won't really be wearing that many layers. And then whenever you stop, if you try to get your tent up when you're not wearing many layers and it's exposed, then you just get cold very quickly. So the first thing I would do would be to get an extra layer on. Whereas at the moment I've kind of just got the tent up. I'm not completely happy with the orientation of the tent. I've kind of got it set up, it's a bit sort of face into the wind, but it seems to be coping. Again, excuse if this is mucking about on the microphone, as in extra noises. So really now, just to get some level of organisation in tent. Do need to get used to having a pole in the middle. I'm not used to that. So obviously at the moment I've decided to have my legs on one side of it. I'm sort of maybe wanting to move around a little bit, but it's not really too much of an issue. I'm using an X-Bed Fleximat here on the bottom, and I have my Thermarest Neo-Air Ultralight super lightweight mattress. Now the R value of both of these combined will be enough for tonight, I'm sure. Now there's just one pocket I think in this. I mean, when you're buying something that's ultra lightweight, you are going to be minimized or reduced on the features. So far I've decided against getting a pump for this. It's just a little bit extra weight. I probably will get one at some stage, but don't really mind blowing the mattress up. I hope you have enjoyed the drone footage. I certainly enjoyed doing it there. You do have to watch it, don't lose your controllers. Little screw-on attachments. I dropped them once like an inch from my foot, didn't move my foot, it still took me half an hour to find them, but I always do carry a spare pair because you're kind of stuck if that happens. So organising in tent here, I might be just out of the view of the camera, but that doesn't really matter. I'm actually going to put my X-Plate over my thermarest. If you look at outdoor channels, you'll see there's a guy who does a lot of stuff in Sweden. You call him Eric Nomak. Doesn't say very much, but his videos are really, really good. And he goes out in like minus 20 and probably colder, I would say. And you know what? If it's good enough for him, I mean, there's a bit of an argument as to whether you put the pad over or underneath your sleeping bag. Or sorry, not your sleeping bag, your kayak mat. It's a wee bit slippy on this sort of floor. So we'll see how we get on with that later on tonight. But the whole setup, I mean, I think it's just a bit more comfortable actually lying on the closed cell foam mat as opposed to lying on the thermarest. One of the slight problems I have is here, this place is infested with sheep. And there's a lot of sheep crap about. And, you know, it gets absolutely everywhere. I can't, with kneeling on the ground, I can't actually kneel in the tent anymore because it's just, the dirt's going to get off my knees onto the floor of the tent. So just an older thermarest, like sort of foam pillow. The drone that I'm actually using here is a DJI Air 2S, and it's not the lightest, but the problem is you come up here with a super light drone, it can't handle the winds and then you can't fly it. So there's always a bit of a drawback, you know, through everything. It's pretty compact and it has excellent ability to fly, and so I've even got crap on the bottom of the drone. It's got excellent ability to fly in high winds, so didn't even get any wind warnings tonight, so I was a bit worried about that before I came out, but no wind warnings, so that was super. Because the drone actually gives you wind warnings whenever you're flying it, and this is just my drone case, and I have a few bits and pieces in here, and it's another little protector bag for the drone and a little gimbal protector. So always a good idea to pop that on. I can't see me really flying the drone anymore because the light's not the best. So that's on there. Might just leave the drone in this little bag. I doubt if there'll be any more drone footage because it's going to be really, really wet in the morning. My sleeping bag tonight is an older bag. It's a Rab. It's an Alpine 600, so it has 600 grams of 800 full power down in it. So that's probably the best way to judge the performance of the sleeping bag. Rab, I think, said it's good down to about sort of -6 comfort. I would personally, I sort of feel the cold a bit, so I wouldn't go just as low as that. I'd be looking at other levels of insulation. The camera that you're viewing on now is a Insta360 1R with a 1-inch sensor, so it's supposed to handle low light really well. And I'm controlling it now just using my phone, which is good because I can sort of set up the framing of the camera. I can push the camera right against the back wall of the tent and still see what is in its view. So I'm going to check off for now. I just get a few other wee things done, and then we'll sort of give you a bit more of a show around the tent, because at the end of the day, this is part of what this is about tonight, our review of this tent itself. So if I can, I do like to get out and sort of field test tents and do reviews. It's a little bit harder. They're actually doing them out in the hills as opposed to doing them from your back garden. To be fair, I have done from my back garden, but that was primarily during lockdown when we weren't supposed to be out. Now, this Altaplex tent, I must say I'm actually, so far to begin with, I mean, I just found it so much easier to organise all my gear because of the room. It is designed for taller people. I mean, there's a lot of height here. If I sit back, you know, there not only is there like a foot and a half above me, and I would be 6'1", maybe nearly 6'2". You know, there's good height all around, so it just makes it so easy to organise your gear. Particularly as well, I mean, I am a bit older and I'm not the most flexible, and I find it very awkward organising in a small tent, so I mean, this is really, really good. The Dyneema composite fabric is excellent. I mean, it's a very, very tight pitch. And this ground, it's not the worst ground in the world, it's not the best either, and I've had really no problems getting the tent set up. I'm also sort of facing the wind a little bit, and it's not having any issues at all. And you know, when you pull on the pole or go to move it around, like, I mean, it is actually very, very strong. I'll show you sort of around the tent a little bit, you know, in a moment. Some things we can look at. The guy lines here, you know, are very, very strong, and these line lock adjusters are actually very, very easy to adjust. And in fact, here to adjust, you know, the porch or the vestibule, it just simply rolls out. There's a toggle here. I know I've kind of got my back to the camera now, so excuse that. That toggle just goes in, and then there's a sort of a clip system here, which I must say works very, very well. And that's it, you know, tightened. Now, there's a decent overlap here. So certainly if you had it set up and the wind and rain was coming from this angle, that's perfect, no issues. But if the wind changes, or if the wind's going to come in here, there's no doubt that that's going to blow water, you know, through there. I mean, the reason that there isn't a zip is because it's, you know, it's a very, very lightweight, and once you start to add features, and particularly I suppose a lightweight zip, they're not the most durable anyway. So it's just a bit of a compromise, you know. If you're using this tent and you are somebody, I mean, the big thing here is that if you're using this tent and you're somebody who has walking poles, who uses walking poles, then your tent system is about 600 grams. If not, if you're then using a walking pole with this, I mean, I don't use walking poles, so when I'm using the walking pole, I think I measured this about just over 900 grams with a walking pole and actually with the pegs, so it's still, you know, incredibly lightweight, and particularly for its size. So I think I mentioned earlier, all of these are very, very easy to adjust, just flicks up and then just actually pulls. And you know, it's a really, really good tight pitch. And it's exactly the same at the corners. So I'll go for a bit of a walk around in the tent, but I mean, that's just your guy line, and again, I think it's 2mm Dyneema. And then you have further fabric bonded in here, which is pretty good, you know, just to make it strong. And the seams, you should be able to see there, are tape seamed. Now, the Dyneema composite fabric itself is absolutely waterproof. I think it's around a 10,000mm hydrostatic head. But then the seams are taped then just to make sure the whole thing is completely waterproof, and you can see that. And again, extra reinforcements at the guy out points. And up at the top here, that's really solid. It fits the walking pole really well. And again, underneath it's really, really well reinforced. I think it's 10 pegs. And I'm going to come back a bit from the tent. You've seen quite a few shots at the front, but you can see just the extra guy out points just here. And two actually on the back at either side. So now I'm really just looking at the inside of the tent. I mean, the vestibule area here is pretty huge. I mean, that's my pack on the side, and there's tons of room, and that's obviously the same on either side. And the inside room is really, really good too. I mean, just at the top of the tent there and right down in the bottom, I mean, you could pretty much sleep two people in this. So you can make adjustments to the height of the ground sheet here just with this. Hard to do obviously one hand, but that'll just pull through a little bit tighter, and you can see there it just lifts, you know, the ground sheet up, and again that's nicely reinforced. And you know, looking here just right down on the sleeping bag, I mean, you saw me maybe chatting earlier in the tent, there just is tons of room. It's a single skin tent, and the idea is that if it gets condensation, it'll just run down the actual walls and then drip through the mesh that you can kind of see there in the front of the camera. So far, without actually having slept in a tent and giving it a really good test, the only negative aspect I have is this massive gap between the fly sheet and the ground. I haven't actually worked out a way of making it any lower than that. I don't think really that you can. Now I know this allows for ventilation, but here in the UK, particularly in Northern Ireland, it's extremely windy, and I know tonight, I mean obviously I'm using this for winter use, but I know tonight that it's just going to be really drafty in a tent. So I personally would prefer that this fly, it's worse here at the front, I'll show it to you in the back at the moment. I wish that this fly would come down a good bit closer, although that obviously is going to increase the condensation levels due to the lack of ventilation. So just really looking at this gap at the back of the tent, I mean I would be more than happy with that. I just wish that the front was exactly the same. You can correct me if I haven't pitched it properly. I've bored this tent, and I must say I pitched it once beforehand just as a bit of a test run, and now sort of we're pitching it again, but I just wish that this would come down a little bit more. So at this point I just want to say a big thanks to Greg Miller, who very kindly lent me his tent. He saw some of my videos on YouTube, actually lives quite close to me, and just contacted me and said, look, would you like to borrow this tent? So very, very kind of him, and without people like Greg and people who have let me borrow their tents in the past, I just wouldn't be able to do these reviews. Stock of a lot of tents is very, very low at the moment, and the manufacturers do not have stock for sponsorship, so they're quite hard to get the hold of. I'll do some further comparisons with my Hilleberg Act 2. Now the Hilleberg Act 2 really is over in this form that I'm using this tent, because I don't carry walking poles and I need a walking pole that's 900 grams, and Hilleberg Act 2 is double that. And certainly so far, I mean, I'm a really big fan of Hilleberg products, and I've had a lot of their tents. Certainly so far I've been really impressed with this, just because of the room and the volume, and it's so easy to manage in the Act 2 and also my Solo. There's decent enough lying down space, but very hard to move around. So I'm impressed, so far. So it's not a perfect tent for me to compare it against, but it's just what I have experienced. And if there's any of you out there that are watching the video and you have a Hilleberg Act 2 and you're looking at a DCF tent, this is certainly an option, and it'll give you an idea. The manufacturers now do say that it'll take up to 60 mile/hour gusts. I'm not so sure about that at all. I mean, this fabric is incredibly strong. I mean, it was originally designed to be used in the sailing industry for like tent sails, so it's incredibly strong. I can't remember the exact statistics of it, but I mean, it's really strong fabric. It would be strong. It's definitely much stronger weight for weight, against nylon or even sil nylon. So it'll be interesting to see sort of how I actually get on tonight. The manufacturers say that it has quite steep walls, that snow will slide off, and that definitely theoretically will happen. But if you're using this in snowy conditions, it's going to be cold just due to the lack of sealing, the tent. It's strange in that some manufacturers, say that one of the ways they make a tent for season is to make it right down to the ground. This particular company, they're an American company, don't necessarily rate it season-wise, but they talk about using it in snow, and snow is pretty much 4 seasons. But yeah, there's a massive gap. But it's just different ways of doing things from different companies. So I'm actually sitting down here at the back of the tent and getting shelter from the wind. So I'm sort of thinking, do you know what? I'm just going to bring, my stove around here and cook myself up a wee hot chocolate. So for those of you who watched my last video and thought that I was close to having a tent fire, I can tell you now I'm not going to have one tonight, because I'm actually cooking outside the tent. Being completely honest, you watch videos to get knowledge and learn stuff and see different things going on, and also as entertainment. So from an entertainment perspective, I actually always edit in sound effects to some of my videos, and my favourite sound effect is a flamethrower sound effect whenever I light my stove. Some food for later. I actually nearly thought there, I probably out of the frame of the camera, excuse that, but I nearly actually thought that I had forgot my gas, but I'm sure you were hoping that I had. Well, some of you probably were. I know if I was watching the video, I'd have hoped that I forgot it. then I have a very, very dry sense of humour. So no chance of a tent fire tonight. Well, I shouldn't really say that because I'll probably be cooking in a tent later on. So as I said, it wasn't nearly as bad as it sounded. That's just simply because I added in a wee flamethrower effect just to make the stove sound a bit more powerful, make it a bit more interesting. Grab some water. Excuse me a moment. So this is the Soto Windmaster. So we'll see if it's any good in the wind or not. Where did I leave that? That's what I was looking for. Here we go. I do actually have feet for the gas here, but you know what, they're in the tent. And I've been back and forward that tent about 20 times, opened and shut the door 100 times. So it's just going to have to do. If it falls over, you can have a laugh as well at that. There's plenty more water and plenty more gas, so it's not an issue. Seems stable enough. So I did mention earlier that I hadn't been camping for a year, and I'm not going to give you a big long story about that, but there's a sound reason behind that. I have a heart condition, and sometimes it flares up, and about 9 months ago I wasn't feeling particularly well. I kind of rode it out for 3 months, and then after 3 months I went and saw my consultant, and long story short, I had actually reduced heart function. I have a pacemaker and I've had that for ages, and I've pretty much been able to do most of the things I wanted to do, but they reckon that due to the long-term pacing it just was affecting my heart. And my consultant just said, right, do you know what, we're going to stick you on a drug cocktail. I think we'll get you fixed, but it's going to take about 4 months. And here we are, 6 months later. I saw my consultant a few days ago. I had an echo done at the start of the process on my heart, and it said that I had a moderate reduction in heart function, and my heart ejection fraction, which is simply the amount of blood that your heart pumps out per beat, was 40%. Now in reality, the best anyone will ever score, not about 70%, because your heart just doesn't pump out all the blood that goes into it. But anyway, long story short, I got another echo done a few weeks ago, and it's been a massive improvement. My ejection fraction has moved up to like 55-56%, which is actually completely within the normal range. I had a chat with my consultant, and I said to my consultant, look, I like to go into the mountains on my own in the winter and camp on summits and snow and stuff. And he said, yeah, go ahead. He said, look, build up to it gradually and you should be fine. And I was hoping that he wasn't going to say, yeah, go ahead, do it. But you need to be with someone, because I just like camping on my own, and particularly if you're going to come up and film, who else comes up with you and is going to put up with you setting the camera up every 5 minutes to get a shot and starting talking and things. That's basically the long and short of it. I'm so delighted to be out again, but that's why tonight I've just come up, and it's been a very, very small walk in, just to build myself into it very gradually, and I'll get a bit fitter as well. So far, I actually feel 100%. And I mean, if you can imagine being passionate about this sort of thing and not being able to do it, for 9 months, I mean, it's not good. So I'm more than happy to be up here tonight. So just if you're interested, a wee bit of information about me and why I haven't been out wild camping. So obviously I've just boiled up some water in the tent. And I must say the total volume here is absolutely brilliant. I mean, I've decided to cook sort of lying down, but the volume in the tent is fantastic. It is quite windy tonight, and with the Vestibule Volume, there's absolutely no worries of the outer fabric being pushed against the inner of the tent. So for cooking, and I think I probably did mention earlier, just getting organised in this tent and relaxing and moving around. I mean, it is so perfect for one person, particularly if you are taller. But as I also said before, this issue with a massive gap, and it's a massive gap between the fly and the ground. there's always a compromise in these situations, and I honestly think that this fly could come down another 6 to 8 inches just to give you a little bit of shelter. I've packed, my rucksack here to give some shelter, and it's kind of working. It's okay, it's sort of giving me a little bit of protection, but in saying that, I'm comfortable in a tent. One thing about these tents is that, if you're going to bring extra gear, the whole thing about this is really, really reducing weight, and if you're going to carry extra gear to keep yourself warm in a tent, then you're kind of cancelling that out. So I was determined just to bring the normal gear that I would have picked on a night's camping, and so far, pretty good. Good morning. So I've just spent the first night in the tent, and I must say I'm actually really impressed. At the start of the evening, the wind was coming from the front of the tent, and I did a fair bit of moaning about the draftiness because the tent only comes down about this much off the ground. But actually, and later on in the night, the wind has swung around as forecast, directly behind me and from the side. And I must say, there's very, very little draft. I'm really impressed with the shelter that the tent has given me against the wind. Now, talking about the wind, at the moment it's maybe 20 to 30 miles an hour, and the structure of the tent is holding up really, really well. It has still maintained its internal volume, so that's excellent. Really impressed. The stability even from the pole on at the top of the tent is very, very good as well. Now, it's lashing rain at the moment. Although it is windy, there's no sign of condensation anywhere, so that's been really, really good. So all in all, I actually am very impressed, because at the end of the day, I've had a comfortable night's sleep in UK winter conditions. It's not extreme, there's no snow, the temperature's maybe 2 or 3 degrees, but there's a lot of rain and decent enough wind, maybe up, as I said, 20 to 30 miles an hour, and I've actually been really comfortable in that. So I'm impressed with the tent. It is super lightweight, strong enough, and if you're going to take it out and the conditions are not too harsh, you'll have plenty of room and a really, really comfortable night's sleep. And I think that's what's important. So look, thank you very much for watching. I'm not going to film any more. It's just too wet outside, and there's nothing much else to see. And it'll not be too long, hopefully, to get another video up. I'm not sure at the moment what it's going to be, but hopefully it won't be too long. And thanks for watching and your support of the channel.